Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're heading over to Pakistan. They've just released their new carbon market policy for 2024, and we're going to break it all down.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. It's pretty interesting to see this from Pakistan, especially since they haven't historically been a big emitter of greenhouse gases.
Exactly. So they're really showing their commitment to a greener future. They want to become a major player in the global carbon market.
Absolutely.
And the source we're diving into today is Pakistan's Policy Guidelines for Trading in Carbon Markets 2024. We'll be focusing on chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Sounds good.
All right, so chapter 2 really sets the scene. And one thing that stood out to me was this whole concept of low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean in this context?
Well, it basically means Pakistan is focusing on areas where they can make big cuts in emissions without too much heavy lifting.
So it's about finding those easy wins.
Exactly. And that makes them a really attractive option for investors who are looking for projects with a faster turnaround.
Smart move. Okay, so it seems like they're really serious about this whole carbon market thing.
Yeah.
But why now? What's driving this push?
There are a few reasons, actually.
Okay.
First off, they're looking to secure resources to meet those climate commitments they made under the Paris Agreement.
Right, those are their nationally determined contributions or
Well,
NDCs?
exactly. So by getting involved in the carbon market, they can reach those goals more efficiently.
So they're aiming to meet those targets and maybe even go further.
Exactly. Which brings us to the second reason.
Okay.
They want to export emission reductions. So if they exceed their targets, they can actually sell those extra reductions to countries who might be struggling to meet their own.
Wow, so it's a win-win. Pakistan gets some financial benefits and other countries get closer to their climate goals.
Right.
It's like they're linking climate action with economic growth.
Absolutely. And there's one more key reason.
Okay, what's that?
Accessing new climate-friendly technology at a lower cost. By participating in the carbon market, they can attract investment in these cutting-edge green technologies.
I see. So they can bypass older polluting technologies and speed up their transition to a cleaner economy.
Exactly.
Okay, so Pakistan definitely has a clear strategy, and they're motivated to make it happen.
Yeah.
Now, Chapter 3 gets into the specifics of the policy, right?
Yep.
What are the main things they've laid out?
Well, they have three overarching goals.
Okay.
Protecting people from climate change, aligning their climate action with their bigger sustainable development goals, and upholding those international climate commitments.
That makes sense. But there's one thing that I found interesting. They're not just focused on reducing emissions. They're aiming for a net zero economy.
Right.
That's a pretty ambitious goal.
Yeah.
So what does that actually look like in practice?
It means going beyond just offsetting those emissions. A net zero economy means actively taking greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere.
Wow.
So you reach a balance between what's being produced and what's being removed.
So it's a long-term vision for a truly sustainable future.
Exactly.
That's a big goal. How do these guidelines help them get there?
Well, they set some key factors for investors to consider. Things like authorization criteria, additionality, and permanence.
So what do those mean?
These factors ensure that the projects getting carbon credits are high quality and make a real lasting impact.
So it's about maintaining the integrity and effectiveness of the whole carbon market.
Exactly. They're really making sure they do this right.
I like that. They're being careful about which projects qualify. Makes a lot of sense.
Definitely.
Okay, so they're being super careful about the quality of these projects. So how do these projects actually get approved? Chapter 4 is all about that, right?
Yep. Chapter 4 walks us through the whole approval process.
Okay.
And it's surprisingly straightforward. They've made it really clear.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. It all starts with something called a project idea note, or a PIN.
A pin.
Yeah, it's like a first draft where project developers lay out their idea.
I see.
And if that PIM gets approved, they get a letter of intent, or an LOI.
Okay, so the LOI is like the green light.
Yeah, it gives them 2 years to put together a detailed plan for the project.
Okay, so it's not just a free pass. They still have a lot of work to do.
Right. They need to come up with a project design document, or a PDD.
A PDD.
Okay.
This is where they get into the nitty-gritty, like how's it going to work? How will emissions be reduced? How will everything be monitored and verified?
That makes sense.
Once the PDD is registered, they can apply for a no objection certificate or NOC.
And that NOC is what they need to actually sell those carbon credits.
Exactly.
It's like a multi-step process with checks and balances all along the way.
Yep. They're being thorough.
And who's in charge of all this? Is it all handled by the government?
Well, it's interesting, actually. They have this concept of managing authorities.
Okay, I like that.
So it could be a government body or a private company, or even local communities.
So different groups can get involved in managing these carbon projects in their area.
Exactly.
I love that. It gives them ownership and control.
Absolutely.
But the government still plays a role, right? Like in overseeing the whole thing.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The National Designated Authority, or NDA, is super important here. Okay, what do they do?
They're responsible for approving project methodologies, issuing those carbon credits, and making sure Pakistan meets its international reporting requirements.
So they're the ones keeping everything in check, making sure everything is above board.
Exactly. It's all about transparency and accountability.
Okay, so we've got a clear process, strong governance, and local involvement. That's a pretty solid foundation.
Right.
But how does all of this actually translate into action on the ground? Chapter 5 is about implementation.
Yep. Chapter 5 is all about the nitty-gritty of making this happen. It covers the financial side, the fees, the support systems. It's about making sure the market runs smoothly and does what it's supposed to.
And of course, there's my favorite part, benefit sharing.
Right.
How does that work in Pakistan?
Well, there are a couple of key mechanisms.
Okay,
First, there's a 5% deduction of carbon credits right off the bat.
so that goes towards Pakistan's own efforts to go beyond their NDC targets.
Exactly. And then there's the corresponding adjustment fee, or
Right.
CF.
Okay.
That's a fee set at 12% of the revenue from selling carbon credits.
Okay.
And half of that fee goes directly to the province where the project is located.
That's a great idea. So the local communities benefit too.
Absolutely. It's about making sure everyone has a stake in this.
And what about those support systems? How do they make sure these projects are actually successful?
Well, Chapter 5 talks about a multi-layered approach. They're planning capacity building programs for everyone involved, developing sector-specific guidelines, and launching public awareness campaigns.
So they're really trying to create an environment where these projects can thrive.
Exactly. It's not just about setting up the market and hoping for the best. It's about providing the tools and the knowledge to make it work.
They're really putting a lot of thought into this.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah, it really seems like they're setting themselves up for success.
Yeah.
But there are always challenges. What are some of the potential roadblocks they might face?
That's a good question. I think one of the big ones is going to be making sure those monitoring and verification systems are really strong. Making sure those emission reductions are being measured accurately and reported transparently. That's key for keeping the whole carbon market credible.
Right, because there's always that risk of greenwashing projects exaggerating their impact. So what else should we be looking out for?
Another potential challenge is ensuring those benefits are shared fairly. The guidelines emphasize that, but putting it into practice can be tricky. They need to make sure those communities are really involved and not taken advantage of.
Those are some important points to consider. But overall, it seems like Pakistan is setting a pretty good example for other developing countries who want to use carbon markets for climate action and sustainable development.
Definitely. I think they've learned a lot from what's worked and what hasn't worked in other carbon markets. They're really trying to build a system that benefits everyone.
It's a really fascinating story. A story of ambition and innovation and a real commitment to a greener future. I'm excited to see how this all plays out.
Me too. And for our listeners, if you're interested in learning more, I encourage you to dig a little deeper. See what kinds of projects are being developed in Pakistan, the technologies they're using, the impact they're having on communities. There's so much to explore.
That's great advice. So that wraps up our deep dive into Pakistan's bold journey into the world of carbon markets. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep asking those questions.